And welcome to the latest Safer West Mercia podcast. My name is John Campion. I'll let my guests introduce themselves and indeed the role that they play.
I'm Chief Inspector Callie Bradley, and I have responsibility for managing the Firearms and Explosive Licensing Unit.
Firearms and Explosive Licensing Unit. It sounds a scary and indeed really complex bit of work that we do in West Mercia, and lots of residents in West Mercia won't know what the unit is, or indeed probably have any contact with it at all. So, what does the unit do, or what's its general purpose?
It does a range of things. About 50% of the work is to manage the 35,500 licenses that we currently hold in West Mercia. So those would be licenses for people holding shotguns and people holding firearms licenses. For various reasons, to get a firearms license, you have to have just cause. You have to show that you have a reason why you have your firearms license. For a shotgun, at the moment, there's no legislation that says you have to have just cause, but that might come in the future. That's one of the things that we're looking at in the future. So we currently manage 35,000, and those licenses are renewed every 5 years. And we apply a very high level of scrutiny to those license applications and renewals in order that we put public safety first, because we're always minded that putting a weapon legally in the hands of someone who does not have the right intentions with that weapon could lead to an incident like they had in Plymouth in 2021. So that's 50% of our work. The remaining 50% is around managing the license, managing people informing us of changes to the license, change of address, transactions, moving of shotguns, the change of a firearm. So if you want to go from one caliber to a different caliber, you have to put in the request first. You have to have a visit. You have to have your security checked. So there's a whole host of things that go on around the issuing of a certificate. So in total, each certificate, bearing in mind we have 35,000 of them, each certificate can take a number of hours within the office doing the public safety checks. Then it would get sent out to a firearms inquiry officer to go and visit the individual. That could take anything between an hour or 4 hours if they have to check the land that person is shooting on to make sure that it's right for the caliber of bullet. Because bearing in mind, if you have a certain caliber of firearm and you are permitted to shoot on a neighbour's land, a farmer's land, to help them, cull pests on the land, the firearms inquiry officer will make sure there are no roads nearby, that you're not shooting near any other houses, to make sure it's completely safe. So that's 50%.
That's a huge number. And West Mercia, three beautiful rural shires, as it were, but only 1.3 million people. 35,000 sounds like a lot for our type of population. Where do we fit in the scale in England and Wales?
So we come second in terms of the number of licenses that we hold to Devon and Cornwall by a few hundred. Right. And it's almost like a competition. Sometimes they're ahead of us, sometimes we're ahead, depending on the year, depending on how many licenses we're able to get through. But what we have, which we have more of in our force area than any other force area across England and Wales, are manufacturers, importers and exporters, military installations, clubs, and registered firearms dealers. So put all of those together, we actually have, that makes up the 50%.
That means on your list of things that have been licensed, there will be some interesting bits of fairly unusual firearms to which not common in our society yet are here, and indeed part of the work of the unit.
And that's not known. And we also have quite a lot of quarries. And one quarry alone might have a number of people that are licensed to carry explosives.
Right.
So we also have to go and check the security, the safety of where they're storing those explosives, how they're using those explosives, how much they've got at any one time. So there's so many complexities in the area of work that we have.
Blowing stuff up, I think most of the population is quite grateful that there's a lot of scrutiny and indeed checks around the storage of them, but who's got access to them. But I can't imagine there are many people in West Mercia who think, oh, that's a role that the police would do. But it is an important part.
There are some
society.
Things that we do on behalf of the Home Office as well. So the Home Office will legislate for certain things, but they rely on the local police to actually ensure that they're meeting those requirements. We do quite a lot of work on behalf of the Home Office and behalf nationally. But yes, it's the police. It falls to the police to ensure, because it's around public safety, isn't it? Of course.
You touched on in your introduction around the changing landscape of the licensing world, and you mentioned Plymouth and terrible, horrific tragedy that happened, but huge implications for the firearms licensing world, and you've seen some big changes since in terms of process and others. Do you want to just, what kind of impact has that had in the work of the unit?
Well, in terms of the coroner's Regulation 28 report that came out, which was came out in February, there were a number of recommendations that both to Home Office, to the College of Policing, and also to Chief Constables. One of those was for every force area to undertake a check of individuals who had had firearms returned to them, having had them taken off them for whatever reason, within the last 5 years. So we employed a retired firearms officer for a period of time to do a review, which meant checking a lot of systems, including our property management system, where if you go and hand in a firearm at a front counter, they will enter it into the property system. So there were a lot of checks and balances done and a report put together earlier this year. And there were over 200 cases that then needed a further review. And that review is still ongoing. We have a deadline of the end of October. So we are working on reviewing every single one of those cases to make sure that we are still satisfied that that individual who was given guns back was done appropriately. So that's just one of the things.
Because there's been other bits around changes to how the licenses are issued in the first place as well, hasn't there?
So on the back of the Plymouth shootings, a review of the guidance was also carried out, and the College of Policing have developed approved professional practice, APP we call it. The statutory guidance came out in 2023. So this has really changed the way that we look at and scrutinise the appropriateness of a person being eligible to hold a weapon. So there are a number of things within there that we have to do. At the moment, we are struggling to do all of those things, but it is understood by the Home Office that it will take forces time in order to be able to meet the statutory requirements. But simple things like doing background checks. At the moment, we check our own systems and we check the national police national database. So we do those checks, but there are a whole range of checks that the statutory guidance tells us that we should be doing, including social media checks, because most people are on social media now, including financial checks, including checks of whenever they've been caught speeding. There's a whole range of things that are in addition to what we're currently able to do.
Fit and proper person, but also anything that might be a red flag to say, actually,
absolutely,
there might be a problem with that person.
Yeah. And there's a lot of case law over the last 10 years that also helps us in making those decisions as to whether someone should be given a license or not. But anything that is raised with a concern will come through either an inspector or will come to myself if it's a high risk application. Or if someone has committed an offence, we get a number of those every week where a person who has a certificate either commits an offence or is involved in, or we have intelligence on to suggest that they should not be in possession of weapons at that point in time and potentially not in the future. And that has to come to a delegated authority under the Chief Constable. So the Chief Constable makes the decision, but she delegates that to an inspector and above to review those cases, and they're quite in depth. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into those.
So the perfect storm of volume, lots of activity in terms of enhanced checks, lots of volume in terms of actual licenses and applications, and indeed that changing landscape in terms of having to go back and review as well. A huge challenge for West Mercia Police, and indeed we're seeing longer wait times for in some areas of the work. But the Eye and the Force have acted in terms of some some investment in recent times. Is it worth just outlining where we've made some recent investment in terms of the kind of areas where we're putting some additional capacity and resource in?
So at the beginning of this financial year, I was asked to recruit some temporary caseworkers into the department following the money that you have put forward to help us reduce the backlog. And unfortunately, to recruit individuals is actually quite a difficult process. Although we did have a lot of interest at the beginning and a number of people got through interviews, of the 6 people that were identified for those posts, we only have 3.
Yeah, it's a challenging job market.
We've had a resignation,
yeah.
We've had people dropping out at the vetting stage, and we've had people who have failed the vetting. So unfortunately, we are only in a position now, some months on, where we only currently have one of those in post. We have another one that's due to join us and another one that's currently with an OC referral. So there are a number of hurdles that are absolutely appropriate to the recruitment of individuals within the police that we have to go through in order to get them in post.
But some of that investment is, whilst it takes a while to make these things happen, it is now starting to come online, and it's based around giving extra capacity to actually, the processing, the work. That's where the investment's been made.
Yeah, we also have a bit of a bottleneck when it comes to the firearms inquiry officers. So when the caseworker has prepared the report and sends it to the firearms inquiry officer to go and do the visit, we have a lot at that bottleneck because we have only a limited number of firearms inquiry officers to go and do that. And like I said, it's only 50% of their work.
Yeah. And West Mercia is not a contained geographic
it can take
location.
them 2 hours to travel to go and do those checks and back again. So we are currently in the process of recruiting 3 more firearms inquiry officers, mostly to focus in Shropshire. We'd like more firearms inquiry officers in Shropshire because it's the biggest county. It does have the most licenses and the most workloads there as well. So that's currently in train. They're being interviewed next week.
So a bit more capacity coming through. We're also potentially seeing, just worth talking about, because we talked about the what it is, we talked about the challenges faced, we talked about some of the steps being taken to try and alleviate some of the challenges. Just interesting to talk about what happens now, as it were. Like all large organisations, we go through a budget cycle, don't we? As we do, there's some changes potentially around licensing fees coming, isn't there, as well? Because West Mercia Police don't make a profit from firearms licensing. It's not one of those areas where it's commercially advantageous. It's an onerous and indeed liability on the taxpayer rather than a cash cow, isn't it? So it's just interesting to understand what kind of happening over potentially the next 12 months, the next 24 months.
So the license fee has been on the cards for change for a long time, and because
it's very low, isn't it?
It is very low, and the government went out to consultation, and I know BASC have encouraged their members to provide their responses on that consultation with some guidance from BASC. So that has been delayed now. So it was supposed to be coming out in November. It's now been pushed back to January.
A government announcement being delayed. It's never heard of.
No comment. So we still don't know what that license fee is going to look like. We've been told it is likely to increase to double what it is at the moment, but even that would be quite low to be able to have the privilege of having a gun. It's not a right. It's not a right for everybody. You really have to go through the public safety scrutiny, and it's a pleasure for you to be able to go and shoot at the weekends, isn't it? So if you're really invested in your hobby, then I'm sure the community would welcome an increase to ensure that it's pays for the service that you're getting on the back of it.
Because some of it isn't just hobbies as well. In West Mercia, as you've alluded to, we not only have military and others commercial activities, but we live in a rural community where guns are part of controlling pests, as you alluded to before. And I think the the professional investment in having that licensable activity. I've not talked to many gun holders or potential gun holders who say the fee is the barrier. And I think the linking that with then us being able to resource it to give because public safety is non-negotiable, but then give a more timely service, I think is absolutely the right payoff between paying more like what it actually costs to license, and then getting that greater level of timeliness around them. And going forward then, so we've got a bit of uncertainty about what might happen with the fee. But I, like you, have heard that we are likely to see a dramatic increase, which is good. But West Mercia also planning further investments. I know we've not agreed next year's budget, etc. But in the planning process, there is that how we continue to ensure there is greater capacity in this area of policing.
So I was asked to put forward proposals for what the flu should look like in the future. And it's really important that we have a structure that meets the statutory requirements that are set out in legislation, and that enables the staff to complete the requirements, the checks, etc., in a timely fashion, because it is actually written into the APP that the forces should be responsible for ensuring that their flu is properly resourced and produces public safety focused results in a timely fashion. So it is written into legislation and into the APP. So I've been asked to put that together. That the first draft has gone to the Deputy Chief Constable, and I'm just working on a tweak to that at the moment, and that should probably be coming to you as part of your engagement in the budget process.
So in terms of our listeners, they are likely to hear further developments over the next 6 months around how we will either be changing or investing further into obviously I set the police budget, but it's based on the operational advice of the Chief Constable and her team. And I think for those listening at home, that journey of we've recognised that there is a challenge. We've seen some huge changes in terms of what needed to happen on top of the huge volume that was there already. We've seen some response already, but it's now then how we plan to the future. And I think it's important to reassure those that might be listening that there is that response to it. It's never going to be quick. It's never going to be instant, is it? But that trajectory to get to where we want to be, I think, really important. Some people listening might be a firearms license holder. They might be wanting to hold one potentially in the future. If you're have an existing license and you want to find out a bit more information or thinking about getting a license, where would they go and have a look and find out a bit more and understand about what's involved and indeed how long it takes and all those kind of things? Where would those listening get a bit more information?
So to apply for a license or to submit your renewal can all be done online via the website. So they can find the links on the website. It's really straightforward. If, as some of our community that don't have access to the internet, they can pop into their local police station during opening hours, and they can have a form downloaded for them that they can fill in and send off in the post. I would reiterate, though, that if you are putting in a new application, you do have to wait for that, because we must put the public safety first in terms of people who already have guns in their possession. So people's renewals that come through, we have approximately 500 renewals per month that come through, and those must be prioritised because people have guns. There are, as of today, 89 individuals who have not submitted their renewal application on time, and therefore they are unlawfully in possession of their guns. That creates a lot of work for us in the unit, because we then have to phone them and chase them and get them to lodge their guns with a firearms dealer or with someone who can take capacity for those guns. That's 89 individuals that haven't followed the advice when we send it through on a letter, which they get at 16 weeks before their certificate expires, to remind them that they have 16 weeks in which to apply.
So the public can help us, licensors can help us.
Absolutely.
But in terms of finding out that information, it's on the West Mercia Police's website.
Yes, it is.
And indeed, if people have got a live application in the process, how do they find out? Because we don't want people bothering us every week to see where their application is. So how do they find out?
If your license is in the system, we will be contacting you nearer the time for a grant. So if you're applying for a new grant, we will be contacting you when we pick your license up to start working through it, because we might need some more information. So we will naturally contact you.
Okay.
If your renewal is in the system, I would beg that you don't try and contact us or phone us, because our phone lines are only open between 11 and 12 every day.
And it's the same people doing the processing.
The same people doing the processing. So that delays them by a whole hour of doing the renewals and the applications because they're answering the calls. And the majority of the answers that people are getting back is, yeah, we'll get to it when we can. Don't worry, you will get your certificate on time. I'm absolutely 100% happy that those who should get a certificate on time on their renewal will get it on time. If it's stuck in the post or whatever, we will issue an automatic extension to cover any postal days, and those are very low.
Yeah.
We only have 55 of those at the moment out of 35,000 licenses.
It is an interesting conundrum, isn't it, in terms of we recognise a challenge around timeliness, as in terms of some of the backlogs that are there, but the ability to reach those backlogs is sometimes hampered by having to explain why the backlog is there. But we are where we are. But it's really interesting to hear the journey and hear you talk through, Callie, about going through the issue and where we perhaps might be going to next. I believe that firearms are part of the society we live in West Mercia, and part of our way of life in some parts. It's not something I particularly do myself, or indeed never fired a gun, but I recognise it is part of not only our economy but also our way of life. And really grateful for you coming today and talking through, and hopefully the listeners will be able to understand some of the context and some of the issues that we've been talking about. And as you said, more information on West Mercia Police's website, but also some great industry sector information out there as well. BASC being another great opportunity for centralised information, advice, and guidance. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we really look forward to, in the future, hopefully seeing some of the changes that we've planned, and indeed ensuring that we've got that timely and safe system of licensing those that should be holding firearms in our society. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.